Hey everyone, it's Rob Ryder on Sunday, June 29, 2014. Name, I am Christian. Surname, I belong to the church. Words used by Pope Francis this week that really I guess you could say they come out of 1 Peter 2:9. Chosen race, royal priesthood, holy nation, a people for God's own possession. Anyways, he had a very good, one of his homilies he did, and it was focusing on your relationship, right? So you got to go to court tomorrow. Name, I am Christian. Surname, I belong to the church. Because if you belong to the church, you're supposed to be taken to the church court, not to the heathen court, which is where they're taking you. They're taking you to a court that really only has jurisdiction in property matters, non-contested property matters, and they're treating you like property. So what we're going to focus on then in this video is the recourse through the church and its state, the Vatican City state. Because all these people, as it filters down, are all really under the jurisdiction of the Vatican City state. In fact, everybody's under the jurisdiction of the Vatican City state. It's just how would you use that? So we're going to look at some documents that show the connection, show a way we might go, and then a couple of other remedies that appear to be in the church that I didn't realize were there. One called hierarchical recourse, and then Roe found it was on the Archdiocese of Miami website. It's called the due process procedure, and basically it's doing an administrative process, and it's telling you how to do it on there. And like everything else, if you don't do the procedure correctly, it's not going to work. And one of the things in that procedure is you had to go to somebody called the conciliatory clerk. All right, so if you didn't go to the conciliatory clerk, well, then you couldn't use this due process procedure. And the other one, this hierarchical recourse, is if you give something to somebody in the church and their answer back to you is not what you wanted, well, you don't need to accept it. You can basically, you send them a letter and say, look, I don't really agree with what you said. I'm asking to change it. And if they won't change it, well, then you can appeal, although that's not the word they use. You can do this hierarchical recourse to his superior. And at the local level, everybody's superior is going to end up being the bishop, and then the bishop is only answerable to the Holy See. Now, the Holy See, in a strictest sense, is the Pope. In its broader sense, it's the Pope and the Curia, and all them little groups they have in there. And so just that's kind of where this is all going, and there's a lot of little pieces I'm trying to tie together in one video, so you're gonna have to bear with me. Let's go on. Well, let's start with this first. Please donate. Stop now, write this down, please. AshleyRutluski@gmail.com. That's the PayPal account name. Or snail mail to myself, Robert Rutluski, 10955 14 Mile Road, Rockford, Michigan, 49341. Before you make a Christian, reduce to begging. Right? This is what I do. This is what I have to offer the world, and I could use a little help. Please do if you can. Let's move on to what do we want to start with here? Okay. So, for one thing, why are we looking at the church? Well, if you followed me for any length of time, I've been all over the place. The church is just where I am now, and I can see now this is where the answer is. I'm going to make them give it to me. But prior to this, we were looking at the different civil rights acts and what they say, and that in there it talks about color of law and simulated legal process and things like this, and then building on that ends up being an international crime against humanity. To use color of law against you, to take you to court without a frickin' sworn complaint, is a international crime against humanity. Period. But yet they do it every day. To take you to court and take your property by using a fictitious plaintiff without a proper summons, without court seals, is color of law, and that is a international crime against humanity. Well, the federal government should be handling that shit. That's what they should be doing. Lower F federal. If I can show them a federal law an act of Congress, whatever, that gives the lowercase federal government subject matter jurisdiction in the matter. And they came up with this in the Civil Rights Act 1866, I believe it was. When you read it, you get in a little ways, and first in section 2 it talks about this color law, and then later on it talks about going to this other act that was passed 3 years earlier that gives the remedies. And so what you're supposed to be able to do is go, if they're using color law against you, like there's no sworn complaint and, fictitious plaintiff, and you're being sued in the name of Rytlewski, Robert Allen instead of Robert Allen Rytlewski, it's not the same person. I don't have to say it is. I don't believe it is. Right? It's all fictitious. It's all color law. Well, I'm supposed to be able to go put a petition into that court case and have it removed to lowercase federal court jurisdiction, have it tried there, and now they're going to have to swear to it. Well, they don't want to do that. Right? Like Ron Class is talking now about going back to the Reconstruction Act and that we're all enemies of the state. Well, that's fine. If we're enemies of the state, this same law I'm telling you has what you're supposed to use for the remedy. You're supposed to go and say, hey, district court judge, show me the frickin' indictment that made me an enemy of the state. If they can't find one, they have to find you innocent. Right? Yeah, you were charged, but there was never an indictment. It's just sitting out there in limbo. It was never prosecuted. Lack of prosecution. Yet it's in the book, shows that you are, so you are. Because you haven't gone and you haven't tried to settle the matter. Right? You haven't enforced your rights. Now, I don't know if any of that's going to work or not, because they don't seem to want to listen. Because all that being said, so in 1965, Civil Rights Act, they came up with this thing called the Community Relations Service. Is a department and this is under the Department of Justice now, and it started under the Department of Transportation, but now it's the Department of Justice. Or is the Department of Justice actually the Department of Transportation, just with a different name? I don't know, but it's the Department of Justice. Community Relations Service is the department's peacemaker for community conflict, tensions, for differences of race, color, and national origin. Civil Rights Act 1964. Okay. Then they added something to it, the Matthew Shepard, James Byrd, hate crimes, race, color, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, or disability. And so all this affects anybody who takes federal funding in any way, shape, or form. So if one prison got federal funding for one thing in a prison system, the whole prison system is now considered under federal jurisdiction. Okay, so we should be able to go to these guys because they're using color law and simulated legal process, which it talks about in the actual act and so forth, but I don't have it on here. Right? Because it's against, I'm part of a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and people for God's own possession. Right? Race and natural origin, right? That they're violating my right to be a Christian and live in peace. They're disturbing my peace. I haven't done anything. They're not charging you for anything. They're just coming and taking your property. Right? They're disturbing your peace. And this was further carried on. So this was something we were looking at out of something we were looking at in the last couple of weeks about claiming this office within the church that used to be a minor order, and now they made it ministries, and could be that it's called the Ministry of Hospitality. I don't know. Right? Because we're running into some stonewalling at the church also, but now when we get to this part, you'll understand, oh, this is how you might overcome that, and what we'll be trying this week. But in the meantime, so this is just an excerpt out of this Ministeria Quaedam that talked about canonical institution into a ministry that used to be the minor orders, which has nothing to do with being a priest. These minor orders were for the laity, always had been for the laity. And they're saying no, and what we're going to do is go back and say, well, I don't accept your no, and if you don't give me a yes, I need to have a canonical recourse to your superior. And so whoever it is, it's him, the bishop, and then a bishop to the pope. It's all that'll be in that food chain. So They said in a church constitution that the church earnestly desires that all the faithful, and it doesn't mean Roman Catholics, anybody who's baptized as a faithful, be led to the full, conscious, and active participation in liturgical celebrations called for in the very nature of the liturgy. Such participation by the church people as a chosen race, royal priesthood, holy nation, a purchased people, Peter 2:9, is their right and duty by reason of their baptism. The Pope says I'm in a holy nation. Right? I'm in a different nation. What nation am I from? I'm from the nation of holy. I'm a chosen race. What's your race? I'm a Christian. That's my race. What's your race, Christian? Well, okay. Race, color, national origin. Got 2 out of 3. These people should care. Now, Roe went and talked to them about this color law and so forth that they were using in a couple of court cases in her foreclosure and disturbing the peace case for questioning why she was being charged, what she was being charged by the county clerk or the county recorder. Sandy, yeah, you're disturbing my peace. Next thing you know, Roe's been arrested. Yeah, that's how crazy it is. Right? That's why if you think you're going to find a remedy there, you're nuts. You know, keep running into the wall. Go look someplace else. And so when she went there and talked to this community relations service, they said, well, we can only work with community groups or community, something to do. Like they couldn't work with an individual, although it does say they can. They said they couldn't. And so my thought at that time was, excellent. This is how we got back to looking at the church. Let's go to the church because they're a community group and say, look, these people are using color law against us. Here's the evidence. Why don't you set up a meeting with the community relations service and we can work this out so that us that are a holy nation, a royal priesthood, the chosen race, don't have to deal with simulated legal processes by people who don't have the same beliefs. Right? And those are the ones that are in charge. You got the false Jew in charge. You got the false Jew and the false Christian running the show. They use false prophets. They'd be like the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. Right? They got a fucking false prophet, man. They don't. It's crazy ass stuff. Right? And as far as the Antichrist, the Bible tells you who the Antichrist is. It's the Jew. The enemies of God. Christ said they're the enemies of God. Right there, he was talking to them. They were Pharisees. Nowhere in that Bible, for you Bible-believing Christians, does it say the Pope is the Antichrist. Where did you get that from? I thought it had to be in the Bible. Yeah. Anyway, so, you're going to have to get over that if you want to use this, but maybe you can use this with your church. Go to your church leader and say, look, dude, all right, this is what the Bible says. I was baptized. There's courts only for Christians, and that's where I want to be taken to. I don't want to go to the heathen court. So, let's call this community relations service people down here and have a discussion. That's one idea. But here's something that canon law says, right? Just canon law in 1983. Christ's faithful are those who, since they are incorporated into Christ through baptism, period. Christ's faithful are those who, since they are incorporated into Christ through baptism, are constituted the people of God, period. Actually, it was comma, period. All right, you want to know if you're a people of God? If you're baptized, you're a people of God. For this reason, they participate in their own way in the priestly, prophetic, and kingly office of Christ. Yeah, I do fulfill the office of Christ. They're called, each according to his or her particular condition. Right? Those baptized are in full communion with the Catholic Church. You don't have to do anything else. And the Catholic Church is the universal church. Just the church. Not the Roman Catholic way of worshiping for the church. The church. The body of Christ. Christ's faithful may lawfully vindicate and defend their rights they enjoy in the church before the competent ecclesiastic forum in accordance with the law. So if you're a member of the church and you want to go to a court that cares about the church, you could go to the Catholic's court. What? these other courts we go to are inferior to the jurisdiction of the church. The church has got extraordinary jurisdiction. It's got God on its side. I know there's a bunch of crazy ass people in the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, that, well, they went there on purpose, man. They're devil worshippers. Well, how much better to make the church look bad and keep you away from it than to put some of their own people in there and do devious things? Right? It's called a plant. Right? That somebody really wants to keep people away from looking at the church. That's my opinion. That's why I look at it harder, because really somebody doesn't want me to look at this. Christ's faithful have the right that no canonical penalties be inflicted upon them except in accordance with the law. And this is what we are suffering right now, is a canonical penalty, because our records of being one of the faithful are being kept in a local parish and not within the Vatican City State civil registry. That simple. Nobody in Vatican City State knows that you're a citizen of the church, because your records are kept local. And that includes your baptismal certificates or confirmation records or whatever. They're not getting to the next level. I'm going to show you a canon law that says that may be what's going on. And I questioned it and got an answer that made me go looking for something else for an answer, and kind of leading to this video. So, okay. So we should be able to use the church. We should, if you don't want to go to the church, you should be able to go to your pastor, whatever, again, and say, hey, get the community relations service from the Department of Justice down here, because I have a complaint about being, my rights are being violated because of my race and national origin. Right? And I have a disability. I have a legal disability. I don't have a sui juris legal personality. Right? I got a legal disability. Somebody else is administering your estate. And see if that works. Right? Because they told Roe it had to be a community group of some kind. So if you got another idea for community group, go talk to them. But, there's no reason not to try the church at the same time. So I'm going to go in that direction. Okay. So, last year, about a year ago right now, Pope Francis came out with this motu proprio on the jurisdiction of judicial authorities of Vatican City State in criminal matters. What's the jurisdiction of the judicial authorities? The Pope's going to set it. You know why he can? Because he has all three powers in the Vatican City State. And so what he said was, the competent judicial authorities of Vatican City State shall also exercise penal, criminal jurisdiction over crimes committed against the security, the fundamental interest, or the patrimony of the Holy See. Well, think about this. You are part of the Holy See. You, me, everybody else. We're part of the Holy See. Should be. Our record should be there. The Holy See should know that we're baptized, confirmed. Instead of seeing us as illegitimate baptized pagans, we ought to be seen as full Christian initiates. But we're not. So, boom, right there. That's because they're messing with the patrimony of the Holy See, which is, that's the inheritance to the people of the body of Christ. It's your freaking inheritance. You got a stake in it, and it's tied to your all capital letter name. That's your legal person. Right? That's your juridical person. It's just being mismanaged. Crimes referred to in Vatican City State laws. All right, so they're going to exercise over, penal over, and then they changed some laws, which was good. We may look at some of those. And then when crimes are committed by persons referred to in chapter or in paragraph 3 below, in the exercise of their functions. And this is what just got all the rest of them, everybody in the church, down to the parish level, and I believe anybody who says they're a public official, under the jurisdiction of the Vatican City State. Right? It's like they take, federal funding. Well, they're playing with the patrimony of the Holy See. It's a far bigger crime. Any other crime whose prosecution is required by international agreement, blah, 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 blah. So who are these people? For the purpose of Vatican criminal law, the following persons are deemed public officials: members, officials, and personnel of various organs of the Roman Curia and of the institutes connected to it. It goes on, in another one to say that it's pretty much anybody in the church. The guys in your local church aren't in the church, they're employees of the church. Right? They're not officers of the church, they're just employees. But they're still, because of this, because they are connected to the Roman Curia, they're under Vatican City state law. Papal legates and diplomatic personnel, okay. Those persons who serve as representatives, managers, or directors, as well as persons who even de facto manage or exercise control over the entities directly dependent on the Holy See and listed in the Registry of Canonical Juridic Persons kept by the government of Vatican City State. See, I think if we get ourselves into that, then they can't mess with our stuff anymore. Right? The government of Vatican City State has got a registry. And in the civil registry, they register citizenship. But these canonical juridic persons it talks about in canon law, they can be individuals or they can be organizations. And so there's organizations now that are listed in the government of the Vatican City State, but I don't know of any individuals, or at least they don't talk about them. Doesn't mean there aren't some, or couldn't be, or that we shouldn't be one of them that's in there. Right, if I'm a member of a holy nation, I want my citizenship papers and get the ball rolling. The jurisdiction referred to in paragraph 1 comprises also the administrative liability of judicial persons arising from crimes, or juridical, right? Because a juridical person is a artificial person, so it could be a corporation, it could be your all caps as you as the sole proprietor, the rightful proprietor of a sole proprietorship. So this tied them in. Okay, where are we going next? Hang on a second. Okay, I went through this last week in my last video, so I'm not going to do the whole thing, but this talks about episcopal jurisdiction. We proceed to legal validity of the episcopal jurisdiction, which likewise dates from the time of Constantine. Right? Episcopal jurisdiction has been around since the 3rd century. How long has the United States been here? What do you think has precedence? They can say what they want. It doesn't change the fact. First in time, first in line. And this goes back to the 3rd century. Episcopal jurisdiction. After the manner of the Jewish synagogues. So it has a history that goes before that. And again, in the time of Christ, Christ was taken to a religious court first with the Jews, then to the state court with Herod, and then to the federal court with Pontius Pilate. And according to the exhortation of St. Paul, the Christians were accustomed from the beginning to settle their controversies before the church rather than carry them before heathen tribunals. It's in the Bible. Church got to have courts. It does have courts. They're in the Catholic Church. If your church don't have courts, don't blame me. The Catholic Church does. You want to know why the Catholic Church has courts? Because it's a sovereign nation. Vatican City State, sovereign nation. And it has its own laws, and those laws are being violated by people who sign an agreement to follow the laws of the Vatican City State, no matter what they think their nationality is. Okay, so down to the time of Constantine, the validity of the bishop's decisions depended on voluntary submission, both parties. Now the decision was invested with the force of law, and in spiritual matters, no appeal could be taken to the civil court. That's never gone away. As early as 1314, Constantine was rejecting appeals, right? The church had said something and somebody brought their appeal to the Constantine as the emperor, and he said, no, go back to the church. So, without going through that whole thing. So the idea that this exists, well, it's just biblical. All right, you may want to stop and just write this down so you can get yourself a copy, because I won't be sending these out. They're too big. Mutual Evaluation Report, Anti-Money Laundering, and Combating the Financing of Terrorism. The Holy See, including Vatican City State. I think if you put in anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism, you would probably find this document from 4 July 2012. And without going through this whole thing, although it's really good, and so I'm going to be doing it on another place. I just want to get to a particular page right now, so because it gives a nice picture of organizational chart of the Holy See, well, of the Catholic Church. It starts with the Roman Pontiff. All the blue is him, right? So he has jurisdiction over the Vatican City State, and he also has jurisdiction over the Holy See. And strictly speaking, he is the Holy See, and generally speaking, it's the Holy See is all these people here that make up the Roman Curia. The Secretary of State, the pontifical councils, the congregations for the doctrine of faith and moral, and all the other ones, and apostolic tribunals, connected institutions, offices, pretty much everything you would think of in the church falls under this section right here. And that's called the Roman Curia, right? So if it's part of the Roman Curia, it falls under Vatican City State law, because look at this little arrow that goes to Vatican City State. Right? So on this leg, at the Vatican City State, the Pope is the supreme monarch. He's got judicial, administrative, or executive and legislative authority. But he doles that out to some guys that make up a commission, and the president of that commission ends up becoming the president of the government, and then it has tribunals. But all these are the powers of the Pope split up here. And this is what has control over the Roman Curia. So these tribunals here, these are the judicial tribunals. All this over here is all executive. All right, this is Secretary of State. Who's Secretary of State work for? All right, and what does the Secretary of State mainly do? They deal with things outside of with foreign relations. Well, technically, we have a domestic relation, because this is where we're supposed to have our citizenship in. It's not that we're not supposed to be there, so it's not international. It's a domestic issue. And these are the courts here, these tribunals, that we would like to get the use of if this other thing called the hierarchical recourse, which was going to go back through this line here, through the Holy See. We'll see that in just a minute. But anyways, that's the you're looking at the organizational chart of the church. And the sovereign state, Vatican City State, which has its own laws, own everything, is over this thing called the Roman Curia, and the Roman Curia. So the Roman Curia answers to Vatican City State, and anybody attached to the Roman Curia answers to Vatican City State, and that's at least down to everybody in your parish, and it could be anybody who holds a public office, because they're all touching the patrimony of the Holy See and mismanaging it. So we're going to try to use this to our advantage. So, okay, now what's next? So let's look at the fundamental law. Where was that? Back and forth. There it is. It's the fundamental law of Vatican City State. The Supreme Pontiff, sovereign of the Vatican City State, enjoys fullness of legislative, executive, and judicial powers. Right here. Roman Pontiff, Vatican City State. Very few in here we had to look at. I'll show you where I found these here in a bit, but I want to get down to the ones that matter for this discussion. Article 15. Judicial power is exercised in the name of the Supreme Pontiff by the organs constituted according to judicial structure of the state. The competence of individual organs is regulated by law. The judicial acts must be carried out within the territory of the state. Right? So it's in the name of the Supreme Pontiff, and they're going to be carried out, there, but it doesn't mean that that's where they're going to be enforced. So that's where the judicial acts are going to be carried out. They got to, I was going to say excommunicate, but they may do that anyways. But if you want to bring somebody from one place to another, you have to get some kind of release. In any civil or penal case, and in any stage of the same, the Supreme Pontiff can defer the instruction and decision to a particular matter, even with the faculty of pronouncing a decision according to equity, with exclusion of any further recourse. If you can just get it in their hands, the Pope can take it over from there. Without prejudice to what is determined in the following article, whoever claims that a proper right or legitimate interest has been damaged by an administrative act can propose hierarchical recourse, which is what we're going to read about here in a bit, or approach the competent judicial authority. And the competent judicial authority they're speaking of is these tribunals in the Vatican City State. The faculty to grant amnesties, indults, remissions, and pardons is reserved to the Supreme Pontiff. Of course, our loved ones they're not guilty of anything. That's the problem. So I don't know that we need these, but yeah, it might be a remission. That was one other thing. There's another thing about this right here. This is back to that episcopal jurisdiction. Is another advantage resulting from the alliance of the Church with the Empire was the episcopal right of intercessions. The privilege of interceding with secular power for criminals, prisoners, and that's what we're talking about. Our loved ones could be prisoners, and unfortunates of every kind who had belonged to the heathen priests, and especially to the Vestals, and now passed to the Christian ministry, above all to the bishops, and thenceforth came an essential function of their office. That may be one thing to petition for is an intercession into your criminal matter. Or somebody's in jail, right? To intercession by the church in a prisoner's behalf. And so you have to start by putting the paper in, and when they say no the first time, it's what do you do next? And that's what we're trying to get to here, is what do you do when you read this and you're supposed to be able to do it, and it doesn't sound like they're going to let you. What's your recourse? So we're going to try to find out here. So hierarchical recourse precludes judicial action in the same case unless the Supreme Pontiff authorizes it. So you could be using both lines at one time. Hierarchical recourse is going to come from, out here in the Netherlands, other organism like your local diocese. And it's supposed to go directly to the Holy See. Now they want to make it sound like this is the Holy See, Roman Curia, but so is just the Pope. So it could be you, your bishop, your Pope. Boom, 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 right? That's all that would be in that food chain. Or the other way is to approach the tribunal, which would be getting hold of the promoter of justice in Vatican City State, or finding out how you do it from here to get it to the promoter of justice in Vatican City State. Because these courts in the Roman Curia, they're under the executive branch, right? They're not judicial. That's the executive branch you're looking at. So they really can't hand down anything in a criminal matter. They can't judge the law, or interpret the law, I should say. They can execute the law, but they can't interpret it. And they may execute a law and not have properly interpreted it, and that's what they're doing now. That's what happens in the civil society. Things are being executed, and the law's not being interpreted because you're never getting it out of the executive branch. They don't want you to. All right. Okay, hang on a second. Okay. Okay, might want to get this one also. This is the annexes that goes to the other book we were just talking about, the Anti-Money Laundering and Combating Financing of Terrorism. Holy See, July 4th. Right, that's wonderful. They did it on July 4th, 2012. What they have in this one is a lot of the different laws and stuff that are kind of hard to find. If you want to know what the fundamental law of Vatican City State is, well, it's on page 111. And then they had some laws on the government of Vatican City State, and then act on the source of law and the penal code and so forth and so on that show where all these jurisdictionally where they're claiming their power from. And so that was called annexes, mutual evaluation report annexes. But because they're kind of hard to read out of these books for me, I'm going to go to some things I pulled out of the other one, the original one. That was the annex, but the one that had the report, where it goes through in the beginning and kind of lays out what the Vatican is and what it isn't, so forth and so on. Without any further ado, judicial power in the Holy See, Vatican City State, is exercised by the courts: single judge, tribunal, court of appeal, court of cassation. Law enforcement authorities: public prosecutor's office, who is nominated by the Pope. The promoter of justice is the prosecutor's office. And a Gendarmerie Corps, the police department. Judiciary and law enforcement authorities have not yet been confronted with money laundering. Okay. Vatican City State and the Holy See. Holy See is not a state itself. It has sovereignty over Vatican City State, which is the smallest sovereign state. Now let's think about that in the world. Vatican City State is the smallest sovereign state in the world, and the Holy See has sovereignty over it. Does that mean it has sovereignty over all sovereign states, or just the Vatican City State? Because they're not really attached to each other. One has sovereignty over the other. Right? Because when they say Holy See here, we're not talking about the Roman Curia, we're talking about the Pope. Right? It's the king of the Vatican City State. Citizenship in the Vatican City State is not by blood or birth. There's 595 citizens, and 348 live outside the territory. So you don't have to live in the territory of the state to be a citizen of the state. 348 of them don't. The term Holy See is strict descent to the Roman Pontiff as legal person distinct from any other legal persons, all by himself. While the term Holy See or Apostolic See refers to the Roman Pontiff, it also, unless the contrary is clear, refers to the Roman Curia. Well, I'm going to make it clear. I mean, to me, it only is the Pope. I don't care about them other people. The Holy See is the preeminent episcopal see of the Catholic Church, forming the central government of the Church. So the Pope forms the central government of the Church, when you can get him in the right jurisdiction. Although it is often referred to as the Vatican, the Holy See is not the same entity as Vatican City State. The Holy See, the Episcopal See of Rome, dates back to the beginning of the Christian times. More on that. It's important to note that the civil activity in the local churches, dioceses, outside the immediate jurisdiction of the Vatican City State is subject to the legal system of the countries where they are located. Civil activity of the local churches outside the immediate jurisdiction of the Vatican City State, so I guess in things other than what we've already covered, they're under the legal system of the countries or countries where they're located. Why this is important is if you go to the church and bring them a criminal matter that's happening to you, they say, well, that's happening in Maryland, right? We're not part of that. Well, sure you are. This says that you're subject to those laws just like anybody else is. Subject to the legal system of the countries where they are located. So then they would be subject to the federal system, which is why we should be able to bring in the Community Relations Service from the Department of Justice to point out that the Holy Nation is being persecuted by heathens. Right? And they got to put a stop to it. They're the peacemakers. Go make peace. The Pontifical Council for Interpretation of Legislative Text, Dicastery of Roman Curia, competent for authentication. Okay, yeah, I guess that don't matter so much. Among the guarantees having function nature, it is noted the pontifical dignitaries and officers are exempt from personal duty. The clerics participate in any reason or office whatsoever outside the Vatican States, hence also in Italy, and in issuing deeds for the Holy See. Issuing of deeds by the Holy See are exempt from any impediment, inquiry, or control. How many deeds did the Holy See get involved in, I wonder? All right, deeds of contract. We're a purchased people. You said you wanted to be baptized, put in the church, they went and purchased you from the godless society. But the godless society is still controlling your estate. Central bodies of the Holy See are exempt from any interference on the part of Italian state. Provision essentially reproduces the rule of international law and exemption of foreign states from local civil, administrative, and criminal jurisdictions. Is an elective monarchy, the structure of which is governed by the fundamental law of 2000, which says that if you believe your rights have been violated, you can either use hierarchical recourse or go to the competent judicial authority. The Pope, Supreme Pontiff, has full legislative, executive, and judicial power. The President and the Pontifical Commission also ex officio the President, right? So, and we talked about that stuff. Fundamental law, relationship between the VCS and the Roman Curia. Well, the Roman Curia answers to the laws of the Vatican City State for the motu proprio. Holy See refers to the Pope as an independent moral person, distinct from other entities established under canon law. Dicasteries rank equally among themselves. Those are what make up the other Holy See. Courts and tribunals. Both the Holy See and Vatican City State operate a system of tribunals in order to consider both civil and criminal matters. For further details, see section 1.5 below. Right, so they did have two. One was the tribunals, the other one was the apostolic tribunals, or something like that. Hierarchy of laws. It consists of a code of canon law, the uncodified law, canon law, canon law, canon law, and then you go to the fundamental law, and then you go to the criminal laws, and all the other things that they put in. Provides various additions to sources such as criminal code and the code of criminal procedures, and those came out of Italy. So it's all been set up. With regard to criminal law, right, the Vatican City State relies on the Italian Penal Code. Court system. The Vatican City State is a department of the government, according to, right, so department of the executive, and really the executive is the Pope, because they're doing this in his name, in the name of the sovereign pontiff. That's what this court does it in. They don't do it in the name of the state of Michigan. This one's in the name of the sovereign pontiff. The tribunal is composed of 3 judges appointed to the Pope Court first instance in criminal and civil cases which do not fall under the jurisdiction of the single judge. A single judge can do simple cases such as small claims and traffic violations. I don't have access to their procedures yet, so I don't know exactly what all that means, but we're going to find out. Criminal jurisdiction over offenses described in the anti-money laundering law is vested in the tribunals of the Vatican City State. However, criminal cases may be transferred to be prosecuted by the Italian authorities. See, so that's how these guys are going to get through doing all this paperwork, is they're going to, if we take it to them, they can just transfer it to Italy and have them do all the prosecution for them. The function of the prosecutor in both civil and criminal cases is performed by the promoter of justice. And if they can do that, as is authorized by Article 22 of the Lateran Treaty, you have to go read that. If they can go to
A
Italy,
vast virus database has been updated.
can they go to other jurisdictions also and do the same thing? I don't know. The Holy See has a distinct court system which deals with religious affairs, violations of canon law, and cases related to functions of the Holy See. Well, we're going to point out that they're violating canon law, so there's no reason we shouldn't be able to use the Holy See's courts. Apostolic Penitentiary is the internal forum The Supreme Tribunal, the Apostolic Signatura, is for justice in the church. So if we're both baptized Christians, that's where it should be. But then it says this: the tribunals of the Roman Curia have no jurisdiction over ordinary civil or criminal cases. Well, the tribunals of the Roman Curia have no... Where are you? Just a second here. So, the Apostolic Tribunals, all right, those are the only tribunals I see in here. So this said, no jurisdiction over ordinary civil or criminal cases within the Roman Curia, right? So these courts don't have. There has to be a matter of faith and sin involved. The other ones go through the tribunals over here into the Vatican City State. Well, again, I'm going to show them where I believe somebody's breaking canon law, so it should be, that's why you have a recourse in either direction, because they're going to be breaking canon law, which is going to be part of the laws of Vatican City State, written a different way somewhere else. The prosecutor exercises his functions with authority. Now this is back to the Vatican City State, and the promoter of justice. So what do you need a promoter of justice for? Because we have promoters of justice in many dioceses. What do you need a promoter of justice for if the Roman Curia has no jurisdiction over civil and criminal cases? His job is to be the prosecutor for criminal law. According to the rules established by internal legal system, the promoter of justice performs his criminal law responsibilities by promoting and instigating inquiries and possibly criminal prosecutions on the basis of circumstances or facts related to goods or natural or legal persons about which he is informed. It shouldn't matter what promoter of justice. By definition, that's what a promoter of justice does. So I just think that somehow the promoters of justice that we have here local are somehow tied to this tribunal, whether they know it or not, and it's one of the things we're going to uncover for them. Because we're going to do a hierarchical... that's enough on that. We're going to do a hierarchical appeal. Where is that now? So let's look at that, okay? What's all this about? Again, if you could, you're going to have to write this down, because you have to pay $2 to get this, right? It's probably the best $2 I ever spent, but if you write down hierarchical recourse procedures at the local level, it'll lead you to this guy named John P. Beale, who's a priest or a deacon, I'm not really sure. But an ordained priest. So you could be a deacon, be part of the presbytery, and be called a priest without being an ordained priest. I think the only ordained priests are actually the bishops, because they go to the Pope first, and they come back and they have a installation ceremony. And it only takes one bishop to make a priest, but it takes 3 bishops to make a bishop. Go figure. So what this is about is, if you get told something that you don't like from the church, it looks like there's 2 paths you can go down. There's this hierarchical recourse, and then there's also a due process procedure. They may end up being almost the same, but just slightly different. But I'm going to base on what I read today on this, and why I'm going to try to do it this way. Okay, my decision is final, said the pastor. He informed Jane. Right? Well, like they just told Roe, my decision's final. I'm not going to put a seal on your petition and send them anywhere. It was his decision. He didn't mention that there would be an appeal to his decision, but apparently there is. An appeal is a remedy against judicial sentence, and canon law bars judicial tribunals from convening or intervening in disputes arising from an act of administrative power from the executive branch. On the other hand, the suggestion that those claiming injury for such administrative decision are without judicial remedy is misleading. Those who have been injured by administrative decrees have the right to make recourse to the hierarchical superior of the church official who made the decision. However, the availability of this remedy for those who feel injured by administrative actions of church authorities is not widely known. Moreover, the exacting norms that must be followed if the procedure for hierarchical recourse is to be an effective vehicle for vindicating the claims of the faithful against the administrative acts of church officials are not well understood, even by many canonists. As a result, the procedure for hierarchical recourse remains one of the church's best kept secrets. Go figure. In disputes arising from administrative acts cannot be resolved at the local level, recourse can be made to dicasteries of the Apostolic See and ultimately to the second section of the Apostolic Signatura. Since diocesan bishops have no superiors below the level of the Holy See, recourse against their administrative acts must, in the present dispensation, be directed to the competent dicasteries of the Holy See. However, if we say the Holy See is the Pope, since the diocesan bishops have no superiors below the level of the Pope, recourse against their administrative acts in the present dispensation, by the Pope. Nevertheless, scrupulous observance to the norms of hierarchical recourse at the local level is essential precondition for consideration of recourse against administrative acts of diocesan bishop by the Apostolic See. Again, another name for the Pope. Got to follow the procedure, right? That's what they're saying. Nutshell, follow the procedure. Let's see if we can do that. Moreover, the vast majority of administrative controversies in the church do not result, originally at least, from the administrative acts of diocesan bishops, but from the administrative decisions of lower level officials as pastors and members of the parish and diocesan staff. And that is absolutely correct. I have never gotten anything back from the bishop. I don't know how many things I wrote to the church so far. In fact, the last one was directed to the archbishop. And didn't get it back from him, got it back from his secretary. His secretary made a decision to deny my access to the archbishop, number one, and, to give me the remedy I wanted. So I'm going to do a hierarchical recourse against him. Right? So this is a thing called clericalism. And I think it's just what they do. Their first answer is no. And unless you know what to do with a no, it's a no. And most people get pissed off and run away, and they don't know what to do with a no. But I don't know that I know what to do with a no, but I'm going to try it this way. In principle, these disputes should be amendable to resolution by hierarchical recourse at the local level, without the need of further recourse to the Holy See. I don't need to go to the Pope. I just need to get it to the bishop. And they're not letting it get there. You can send it to the chancellor, you can send it to the vicar general, you can send it to the moderator, you can send it to the vicar general, you can send it to the vicar general's assistant, you can send it to defender of the bond, promoter of justice, all these places. They'll answer you. But you won't get an answer from the bishop. So if you don't like the answer these people are giving you, you have recourse to their bishop. That's what they're saying. You won't have to go to the Holy See. The bishop's going to handle it. Thus, this paper will address what needs to be done at the local level to make the procedure for hierarchical recourse an effective remedy for those who feel aggrieved by administrative actions on local officials. Okay. So, the scope of the procedure. Hierarchical recourse available as a remedy to challenge all singular administrative acts which are given in the external form outside a trial, excepting those which have been issued by the Royal Pontiff or Ecumenical Council. Thus, hierarchical recourse cannot be employed to impugn the many decrees issued by a judge in the course of a judicial trial, nor can it be employed to challenge the decrees of the Roman Pontiff. Right? So, I don't want to challenge anything from the Royal Pontiff. I want to use it to my benefit, and that's what they're stopping from happening. Although general executory decrees and instructions are not subject to challenge through the procedure of hierarchical recourse, the procedure can be used to contest not only individual decrees and precepts, but also recepts, permissions, privileges, and dispensations issued by administrative authorities of the church, as well as their refusal to issue them. The omission is a reason to use the recourse. So here's a for instance. This week I sent this to the Archbishop of Detroit. Greetings. I come in peace to love and serve the Lord, petitioning the appeals court of the Archdiocese of Detroit to execute a summary judgment in my favor, confirming my status as a full Christian initiate, and confer upon me the office and benefits that await my acceptance by whatever description it is known. It is my belief, based on Canon 895, that there is no record in the confirmation registry of the Diocesan Curia of my confirmation of the Catholic Church. The result of this administrative decision is the apparent forced disappearance of a person, which could be construed as the unforgivable sin of denial of the Holy Ghost, if not corrected. Please correct the error and perform the installation. I have attached a copy of my baptismal certificate that witnesses my confirmation as a member of the body of Christ and citizen of the Holy Nation. I ask for canonical institution into the lay ministry of the Ostery, also known as the porter, doorkeeper, usher, and await your judgment and decree. If an Episcopal Council has excluded this office and decided on a different office within the church for the laity, please forward me its details for my consideration. If you're not sure, please forward my petition to Pope Francis for his determination. I declare this on the 23rd day of June, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and so this got bumped around a little bit. First, the one that matters is it eventually ended up with the secretary. Dear Miss Roluski, since your correspondence intended for Archbishop somebody deals with the matter exclusively pertaining to the ministry of the Diocese of Saginaw, the appropriate authority for your recourse would be in the Diocese of Saginaw. Please contact them to address your concern. Now, that could be absolutely true. Or it could be confession and avoidance, and he doesn't want me to talk to the Archbishop, right? Because I didn't get an answer from the Archbishop. I got it from a secretary, and I wanted an answer from the Archbishop. So I should be able to ask this guy to reconsider his decision not to give it to the Archbishop, for him to make a decision if he wants to take jurisdiction over it. And if he doesn't do that, then I can do a hierarchical recourse to the Archbishop and just send it to him. So that's an idea of how this can be used. You go one place. So let's say you have a foreclosure, and you took it to your parish priest, said, look, this is color law and simulated legal process are using against me. Right? And I'd like the church to intervene on my behalf, right? Because my rights within the church have been violated, blah, blah, blah. If you, just a little thing, he's going to say no. I'm telling you right now, he ain't going to do it. He ain't going to want to do it, right? As soon as he does that, you say, then you're going to send him another letter, it looks like, that says, look, I'd like you to reconsider your decision. Perhaps we should take this to arbitration. If he nixes that one, then you go back with one more and say, well, then I need you to take this to the hierarchical recourse to the bishop. And he has to take it to the bishop. And there's your three-step process for an administrative being executive answer instead of going to the courts. 1, 2, 3. Let's read on. An individual administrative act is one issued by a person who possesses executive power within the limits of the person's competence. At the level of a particular church, diocesan bishops, their vicars, and their delegates possess executive power of governance. So the diocesan bishops, vicars, and their delegates possess executive power. Within their respective spheres of competence. So competence, right? That means how big is their jurisdiction? And what do they have it over? Whatever it is, they got executive power over it. Therefore, their administrative acts can be challenged by the procedure for hierarchical recourse. There you go. It doesn't matter that they have the juice to do it, you can still appeal it. because they may just be a mean old man. More problematic is the susceptibility to challenge through the procedure for hierarchical recourse of acts of administration nature issued by pastors and by various lay and clerical officials of diocesan curias and parish staffs. This is interesting. Most commentaries on the 1917 code held that despite their position of an ecclesiastical office, pastors did not enjoy power of governance in the external form, right, outside of the church. Only things in the church, only to do with faith, the sacraments. Not, hey, there's a property dispute and this guy's stealing my property. Couldn't get involved in that. Since the usual practice in the United States has been not to establish positions in diocesan or parish staffs as ecclesiastic officers in the strictest sense of the term, well, all that means is lawful, right? So they're not de jure, they're de facto. Right? They're not in the church, they're employees of the church. If it was an ecclesiastical office, they would be in the church. We're trying to get an ecclesiastical office in the church. Right? So in the United States, they're not in the church. I don't know if it's like that everywhere else, but here they're not. They're de facto agents of the church. Still under Vatican City state law, thankfully. But continuing on, it is not always clear what authority the occupants of these positions possess. Right? Do these people have any frickin' power? That's what this is saying. Since the usual practice in the United States has not been to establish positions in diocesan and parish staffs as ecclesiastic offices in the strictest sense of the term, it is not always clear what authority the occupants of these positions possess. In other words, they may not have any authority to say no to you. And yet they do. Got to take them to the diet, got to take them to the bishop. Moreover, the ongoing debate about the capacity of lay people to exercise ecclesiastic power of governance or jurisdiction has given rise to doubts whether positions occupied by lay people, whether their apparent authority can be considered to involve the exercise of power of governance, and therefore whether the actions of these officials can be included among the individual administrative acts, which can be challenged, right? Basically, so you can challenge vicar generals. Can you challenge the lay chancellor? That's what this is saying. The revised code explicitly notes that under authority of a diocesan bishop in those ministries in whose ministry of Christ he has been called to share, the pastor carries out the functions of teaching, sanctifying, and governing. Thus, the office of pastor now clearly carries with it that share in the power of the government needed to direct and moderate the pastoral life of the parish. Right? So even your local parish priest, even though he's not in the church, has the power he needs to take your paperwork and send it up the line. And he's refusing to. Although the functions carried out by members of the parish and diocesan staffs may not have been established as ecclesiastic offices, these staff members exercise their functions under the authority of, respectively, the pastor or the diocesan bishop. The pastor or the diocesan bishop. Consequently, within the scope of their duties, they cooperate and exercise power of governance enjoyed by the pastor or the diocesan bishop in virtue of delegation. The cooperation can therefore result in administrative acts susceptible to challenge by procedures for hierarchical recourse. It was a lot of words to tell you, yes, you can use the same process on anybody in the church. You're going to take your complaint to their superior and then to his superior. The fact that some of these parish and diocesan staff members are lay people does not preclude their decision from being genuine administrative acts, as the apostolic signature observed. And the administrative act, inasmuch as it proceeds from a person who possesses administrative power, is also able to be derived from laypersons who might have been called to cooperate in the exercise of power, administrative or executive, according to the norms of law. Whether they are issued by office holders or delegates, clerics or lay, administrative acts have three essential characteristics. The administrative authority issuing the acts enjoys discretion. The acts themselves are directed towards achieving the public good within the limits of law, and the acts are immediately alter the status of affected persons. Thus, the decision to lay parish director of a religious education acting pursuant to mandate from a pastor to refuse a young man admission to sacramental confirmation because of his failure to comply with the requirements of the parish confirmation program is an administrative act which can be challenged. Okay. While administrative acts are often issued in writing, many routine administrative acts are rendered rather routinely and without formality. Whereas executive power, now this is interesting, so whereas executive power produces administrative acts, both general and singular in character, not all administrative acts come from executive power, or from any power, in the juridic sense of the term. By what authority did they do what they did? They didn't have any, but they did it. What are you going to do about it? That's what it's saying. Some people have executive power and they do administrative acts. Other people do administrative acts but they have no executive power. Those are the ones you can challenge. You can challenge all of them, but those are the ones you'll get overturned because they didn't have the juice to make that decision in the first place. It can be said that such acts proceed from power of leadership, which supposes some power of governments and is based on it. Right? It supposes, right? What does suppose mean? That's a presumption. Does not need to express itself always and for every directive, even directives concerning the disciplinary area by way of decrees or rescripts, namely formal acts of executive power. It's just like they do in our courts that you go to now. They don't do anything and put their name to it. They just, issue some stuff and you don't know what to do with it. Well, at least in the church, they're telling you what to do with it. Thus, the range of administrative decisions, acts to challenge through the procedure hierarchical recourse extends well beyond the individual decrees and rescripts in the strict sense to embrace all kinds of administrative decisions. In certain circumstances, an administrative authority's omission or failure to act can also be the object of hierarchical recourse. So let's look at Canon 895 real quick. This is the one I was basing my latest action to the Archbishop about. This is under proofs and registration of confirmation. Now, the reason for this is where I've already shown you where it says baptism alone. All right, there's a canon law. I should go find that one too. I said because they're so closely related that the sacraments of baptism, Holy Eucharist, and confirmation are all required to be considered a full Christian initiate. Well, if you're not a full Christian initiate, but you were baptized and you're not a full Christian initiate, then you're just a baptized pagan. Right? So first of all, that can be disputed. But second, I have these because I was brought up Catholic. I have done the confirmation and the Holy Eucharist and the sacrament of penance and done them all. So, but let's read about how that they're registering this confirmation. Because confirmation is you basically, making your public profession of faith and becoming a member of the church. The names of those confirmed, the minister, the parish, the sponsors, and the place and date of the confirmation are to be recorded in the confirmation register of the diocesan curia. Right? So either there or where we're going to next. Wherever this has been prescribed by Episcopal Conference or diocesan bishop, so there should be a decree to the fact, in the place, in the register to be kept in the parochial archive. So it should be kept in the confirmation register of the diocesan curia unless there has been enacted a decree saying to put it in the parochial archive. Well, I already know that they're kept in the parochial archive because they're going to tell you to go to your parish to get your frickin' confirmation record. But this says it should be in the diocesan curia, and the diocesan curia is definitely attached to the Roman curia. And so it would get up through the Secretary of State, and boom, all of a sudden the church knows that you're a Christian. And that's what isn't happening. It's being kept local. The Pope talked about the exact same thing with baptisms, and the last act of Pope Benedict XVI was to pass a law to change the wording in the baptismal ceremony to make it perfectly clear that when you were baptized, you were being baptized into the universal church and not a local parish. If that's the case, how come the universal church doesn't have my baptismal certificate? Why is it in the parish? That's the questions we're going to ask. We're going to say that's affecting our rights in the church. That's where we're going next. Good stuff. Let's see. Let's get back to this. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to follow this. We're going to follow the law. So it can be anything, right? In certain circumstances, administrative authority's omission or failure to act can also be a subject to hierarchical recourse, right? So by not putting my record into the right registry is an omission. They could say, well, yeah, but we're putting it over here. Okay, well, show me the law that says you can. If you can't, then you're just doing it by a custom and you have no executive authority to do it that way. That's just your administrative decision. And it's going to be overruled. Now go put it over here in the other file. Wherever the law orders a decree to be issued or an interested party legitimately propose a petition or recourse to obtain a decree, the competent authority is to provide for the matter within 3 months for the receipt of a petition or recourse unless the law prescribes some other time period. We're going to try to see if we can speed that up. I don't know how long it's going to take. If the competent authority fails to issue the required decree or to respond to the legitimate petition or recourse within 90 days, his or her response is presumed to be negative, right? Which means you could go with respect to the presentation of further recourse is presumed to be negative. Thus, when a person legitimately petitions for dispensation or permission or lodges recourse against an administrative act and the authorities fail to respond within 90 days, the person is free to pursue recourse before the hierarchical superior of the authority before whom the petition or recourse was first presented. To put it bluntly, stonewalling will no longer be succeed. I don't know if that means you got to wait 90 days. Maybe it does say that. To initiate the procedure or hierarchical recourse, a person must be able to claim that he or she has suffered or threatened with some injury as a result of an administrative act of the church authority, or the omission of an act, or whatever it is, whatever your claim is. The claim is often that an administrative act has abridged the rights, right? So this is what the guy's telling you to do. Claim that the administrative act has abridged a right of reoccurring party, but it is sufficient that the person be able to claim that an interest was damaged. And I'm going to say by this guy, secretary, telling me to go to Saginaw instead of him giving it to the bishop, is, damaging my property. They can always say no, and I probably will send something to the bishop in Saginaw, because he could have gave me the exact answer I needed. Thank you very much. I don't know which one it is yet. The ecclesiastic official, let's see, it's essential, however, the initiator of the procedure be able to show that he or she has suffered or is threatened with some concrete damage as a result of the administrative act. Your rights within the church are going to be violated. The ecclesiastic official who issued the administrative act being challenged is the equivalent of the defendant in the procedure. So in this case, it would be the secretary for the archdiocese, for the archbishop. However, his or her administrative act enjoys presumption of validity. There's that presumption again. And legitimacy if it was placed correctly with respect to the external elements. Thus, the administrative official does not have to show that he or she acted properly. The burden of proving the illegitimacy of the challenged administrative act rests on the one initiating the challenge. So you have to bring the claim. Hierarchical recourse is to be proposed before the immediate hierarchical superior of the administrative authority who issued the challenged administrative act. So for me, it would be the archbishop. If you went to your priest and he didn't do something, it would be the archbishop. If you went to the priest's secretary and she didn't do something, it would be to the priest. And if he didn't do something, then to the bishop. Right? But at the end of the day, locally, everything ends up at the bishop, and anything that I know of, anybody's ever put anything in, hasn't made it to the bishop. It's been shot down by all sorts of people, but we ain't got anything from the bishop yet. And so we need to go back and say, I don't accept this as the answer, and it's affecting my rights, and I want a hierarchical recourse. Make the bishop aware. The recourse can be proposed directly to the hierarchical authority himself, or indirectly through the administrative authority who issued the decree, who is obliged to transmit it immediately to the competent ecclesiastic superior. Right? So you just send it back to the guy that won't do it for you and say, well, then take this to your superior. You're claiming hierarchical recourse. The essential first step, seeking revocation of the decree. There's always the first step, right? Don't do C before you do A. Before making recourse to the hierarchical superior of the authority who issued the administrative act, the aggrieved party must, in many cases, petition the author of the administrative act to reconsider his or her decision, revoke or amend it. The petition for reconsideration of administrative act is of critical importance. Right? It's your first letter. When such petition is required, the failure to make it will result in the aggrieved party's forfeiture of his or her own right to make recourse. The petition for reconsideration of an administrative act must be made within 10 useful days of the legitimate notification of the administrative act. What are useful days? I don't know. Monday through Friday. You got 10 days, right? If you don't, and if you haven't sent it in within 10 days, you lost your, they want you to believe you lost your ability to have hierarchical recourse, which is why then you might have to go through the court system. In ordinary circumstances, legitimate notification of administrative act requires that it be communicated in writing. Okay, and so basically I have that in writing. This guy wrote me back. It didn't say it had to be signed or mailed, just had to be written. Well, those are written words that I disagree with. For grave reasons, administrative act can be communicated orally, presence of a notary or two witnesses, but a written record of the communication must be made and signed by all present. Person is summoned to receive or hear an administrative act, but without cause fails to appear. They've still been communicated. However, when an administrative act is not legitimately communicated to an affected party, the act has no judicial effect, and the peremptory time for petitioning for reconsideration does not run. So if they never get a hold of you, they basically said no after 90 days, right? But they didn't ever tell you no. So your answer was never put in writing, or their answer to you was never put in writing. And so I think you can challenge those. Say, look, I sent this to this guy on this day. You didn't do something with it. Take it up to the bishop. The petition for reconsideration of administrative act can be quite brief and simple. All that is necessary is that the injured party request that the administrative act be revoked or amended and explain the damage that he or she will suffer if the administrative act is allowed to stand. You're going to harm my rights within the church. That's all I need to tell them. It might be helpful if this petition also indicated the aggrieved party's willingness to submit the matter to conciliation or arbitration. This requirement of a petition to the author of the administrative act for reconsideration is intended to alert the administrative authority to the fact that perhaps inadvertently his or her decision has injured somebody. The petition for reconsideration also puts the administrative authority on notice that the injured party is prepared to challenge his or her decision and opens the way to resolution of a budding controversy through conciliation or some other method of alternate dispute resolution. So you're going to go to your brother first, and then you're going to bring in another witness, and if you need to, then you take it to the next level. In certain cases, a petition for reconsideration is not required prior to initiating hierarchical recourse. One need not request reconsideration of an administrative act issued by a subordinate of the diocese before making recourse, diocesan bishop himself. Thus, one can recur directly to the diocesan bishop without prior petition for reconsideration to challenge administrative acts of pastors, vicar generals, episcopals, members of the diocesan staffs acting as delegates of the diocesan bishop. So I don't really need to go back to this secretary, although I'm going to do it because I think I should. I should be able to just go to the bishop because I want him to take it to the bishop. No petition for reconsideration is required when the decree being challenged is one that is self-decided a recourse unless it is a decree of the diocesan bishop. Is one that is self-decided a recourse. Thus, when disgruntled parochial teacher made recourse to the pastor against the decision of the school principal, he or she is not required to request that the pastor reconsider his decision to uphold the decision of the principal before making further recourse to the diocesan bishop. Right, so it's pretty easy. You can get right to the bishop. One need not request reconsideration of an administrative act issued by a subordinate of the diocesan before making recourse to the diocesan bishop himself. I don't know, it's everybody in the church that's under the bishop is under him. You don't like the answer from somebody in the church, you send it back and say, then I appeal for hierarchical recourse to the bishop. Please take him my petition. When law requires administrative authority to issue a decree, has legitimately pros, a petition, recourse, obtain decree, administrative authority fails to issue the decree within 3 months. Right? You haven't heard in 3 months? You can say it was no. You can just petition the bishop. Echoing the advice of St. Paul to the fractionists and feuding church at Corinth in the early century Christian era, the Revised Code encourages parties administrative controversies to settle their disputes among themselves without the intervention of higher ecclesiastic authority. They are urged to seek an equitable solution by common counsel, possibly using the mediation and efforts of wise persons to avoid and settle controversies in a suitable way. This recommendation extends to the administrative domain. Canon law's strong preference of non-litigious resolution of conflicts in the judicial arena. For instance, let me open this up here, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to read this. This is going to get too long. But please just Google due process procedures for Archdiocese of Miami. And you'll find it. It's on the tribunal page, miamiarch.org /due_process.htm. Right? If your brother should commit some wrong against you, go to point out his fault. Keep that between the two of you. If he listens to you, you should have won your brother over. If he does not listen, summon another, so that the case may stand. Right? So that's the conciliatory. And because I'm not going to go through this whole thing, let me get down to the... They got a person called the conciliation clerk. It is for the diocesan bishop to appoint a conciliation clerk, whose duty shall be to process any petition in accordance with procedures that follow. The term of office of the conciliation clerk shall be 3 years. You need to call your diocesan bishop or your diocese and find out who is the conciliation clerk. All right, because somehow they're going to be the mediator if we need to use one. They've already been appointed. And I believe this is just the step we're missing. We're not going to this conciliation clerk when we don't like the answers we're getting. Now, I'm not sure you have to do it with this hierarchical recourse, but it is starting to talk about the conciliation clerk, so it'd be good to know who they are and ask them. To ensure availability of suitable person to assist parties' administrative controversies to find equitable solutions to their disputes, Episcopal conferences have authorized, mandated the establishment of a diocese of stable offices and councils to facilitate the equitable, voluntary resolution of disputes according to the norms established by the conference. Right? Or the bishop can establish them for their own territories. In the United States, the National Conference of Bishops established them. Nevertheless, the conference left it to the individual diocese to decide if they're going to do that or do some other thing. But somewhere there's this due process going on within your diocese and a conciliation clerk. And if you write them and they say they don't know who it is, then say, I appeal that to the bishop, go ask him. Hierarchical recourse. The revised code especially recommends utilization of the services and counsels for reconciliation or arbitration. And that's what this whole due process thing is about, is reconciliation and arbitration. When the aggrieved party has already petitioned the author of an administrative act to reconsider or revoke it before the preemptory time of making recourse has lapsed. Because you only have 10 days. The revised code especially recommends utilization of the service of these people when the aggrieved party has already petitioned the author of the administrative act to reconsider or revoke it, but before the preemptory time for making recourse has lapsed. Okay? So send it to the guy as soon as you can, and then call the conciliation clerk. The hope is the need for making recourse to the hierarchical superior can be averted altogether, nothing less. There is only a relatively brief time frame, 15 useful days, within which to make recourse after the administrative authority has refused to alter his or her decree, or the preemptory time for response to the petition for reconsideration of the administrative act. As a result, the aggrieved party who enters into conciliation in good faith may unwillingly surrender his right to make recourse. Right? You go to conciliation, they stall, boom, you lost your right to recourse. So this says send it for the recourse first and then call the people before that time has gone up, that 10 or 15 day window, because now it's talking 15 days, so really, really quick, talk to them. The solution to this dilemma may be for the petitioner to lodge recourse within the preemptory time provided by law, but to assert his or her willingness to engage in the continued efforts at reconciliation. Do the one, like they said earlier, and just put in there that you're willing to have this go to to a conciliation clerk. Recourse must be proposed within the preparatory time limit of 15 useful days. Well, I thought it said 10 before. I have to go back and find out what happened. Okay. Unfortunately, most of the faithful, including most members of the clergy, are wholly unaware of their right to make recourse against individual administrative acts that adversely affect them and the very strict time limits of making recourse. Nevertheless, ignorance about the law cannot be presumed. Right? You're presumed to know the law. It is incumbent on the party who claims to have been ignorant of his right to make recourse to prove this ignorance. In the mind of Holy See, it seems clerics, above all, are presumed to know the law. When a party has not been informed of his or her right to make recourse against an administrative act, and especially when he or she has been affirmatively misled about the availability of recourse, it should be possible to build a case for the party's invincible ignorance of the law governing hierarchical recourse, and thereby to reinstate the party's right to make recourse. In other words, they never told you could appeal. Right? They send you these things, go ahead and do this, right? But you can appeal. They don't tell you what, but you could appeal my decision to the bishop. I don't know if it's easier to bring it up again or to say, hey, I've brought this up before, you didn't do something with it, and so let's take it to the bishop, right? But it's one or the other. Like all juridic acts, individual administrative acts are presumed to be valid and licit if it is placed correctly with respect to its external elements. Consequently, recourse against administrative act does not normally result in automatic suspension and execution of challenged act, blah, 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 blah. The petition to the author of administrative act for reconsideration is presumed to include a petition for the suspension of the execution of the administrative act. I don't know that my administrative act is them just not giving it to the right person. I guess I can't say they've said, no, we can't do that yet, but there are people who have tried to put in criminal complaints and they're not getting looked at the way they should. Right? And so that's an administrative act that can be appealed for that reason. Nevertheless, since administrative authorities may not be aware of the subtleties of law, the aggrieved party would be well advised to include in his or her petition for reconsideration an explicit request for suspension of the execution of the administrative act. prosecution of the recourse. To pursue hierarchical recourse against an administrative act, one must submit a written petition to the superior, either directly or through the author of the act being challenged. The petition should include summary of the series of events that led to the issuing of the challenged administrative act and reasons in law, and in fact, if the aggrieved party believes they should be overturned, a copy of the administrative act being challenged should be appended to the petition. Since the burden of proof rests on the one challenging the legitimacy and opportuneness of the administrative act, the aggrieved party should also attach to the petition any documents in his or her possession that support the claim that the administrative act should be overturned, or if documentary evidence is unavailable, a list of evidence should be gathered by hierarchical superior before he decides on the recourse. Right? So you're either going to give him the evidence or he's going to have to go get it himself. The person making recourse has the right to the services of a procurator and advocate to assist him or her during the procedure for recourse. If the recording party does not appoint a legal representative and the hierarchical superior believes such assistance is needed, he or she can appoint a procurator or advocate ex officio. So I would be asking them, well, then appoint me an advocate. You don't like the way I did it the first time? Appoint me an advocate. As part of my hierarchical recourse, I have the right to have you appoint me one. The appointment of a legal representative does not, however, absolve one making recourse to be present personally to respond to any questions raised by the hierarchical superior about the issues. I'm happy to be there. I'll swear to it. The code does not elaborate on the procedure to be followed by the hierarchical superior for reaching a decision on the recourse made him or her. He can just sit on the throne and make a decision. Nevertheless, the decision resolving the recourse is itself a decree. Therefore, the superior must observe the minimal procedure formalities for issuing an individual decree. That is, he or she must seek out the necessary information and proofs, and insofar as possible, hear those whose rights are injured. The decree itself must be in writing. He's got to hear, see, now he's got to listen to you. Hear those whose rights can be injured. We hadn't even been able to get paper before him before. Now he's got to listen to us. The decree itself must be in writing, must contain, at least in summary form, the reasons for to motivate it. The decree has no effect until it is legitimately communicated to the interested party. Failure to observe these minimal standards, due process can result in the decree being overturned on further recourse. The hierarchical superior has gathered sufficient evidence to make an informed decision about the recourse. He or she has to issue a decision. This decision is not issued within 3 months of his or her receipt of the recourse. The decision is presumed to have been negative for purposes of fear, and then you can take him to the next level. However, the superior can also rescind and revoke it. In resolving a recourse, a hierarchical superior can confirm the original decree or declare it invalid. However, the superior can rescind, revoke it if seems more expedient. The superior amend, replace, or modify it. He can do whatever he wants once we get it in his hands. I'm not going to say what he's going to do yet. I'm going to give the man a chance to do it. I haven't been able to talk to a bishop. The faithful have the right to make recourse against individual administrative acts that injure their rights or important interest. When they exercise this right, they have further right to prompt and reasonable response. However, this right to make recourse and information about how to exercise it remains a well-kept secret in the church. I'm going to hire this dude. Hey, I'm appointing you, Mr. Beal, Father Beal, F.R. Beal. I think I'll appoint you. You seem to know what you're talking about. Although our tribunals routinely inform parties in marriage cases of their right to an appeal, a decision which they disagree and assist them in exercise this right, administrative acts rarely advert to the possibility of challenge the act by hierarchical recourse, and administrative authorities seldom explain the steps that must be followed to make recourse. As a result, by the time aggrieved parties become aware of their rights to make recourse, if indeed they ever become aware of this right, the preemptory time limits for petitioning the reconsideration of the administrative acts or for making recourse against it have often elapsed. But they didn't tell you. In practice, at least, the procedure for resolving a recourse is almost wholly unstructured. Although the hierarchical superior is bound by general norms for issuing individual decrees, when he or she issues the decree resolving the recourse, these procedural protections are rather minimal and leave the insurance of procedural fairness during the recourse procedure largely to the discretion of the superior. While this procedural minimal may be appropriated when the issues are simple and interests at stake are small, it may be and be perceived as inadequate when issues are complex and stakes are high. Yeah. Although those making recourse against administrative decisions have the right to the assistance of an advocate and may well need an advocate service to comply with the procedural norms, get the advocate. Get the advocate. Don't do it yourself. Get the advocate. Make and give you an advocate. It's your right to have an advocate. Make their case effectively. Skilled advocates can be difficult to find. Damn it. If the procedure for hierarchical recourse is to be effectively remedied for the vindication of the rights of faithful in church administrative process, efforts will have to be made to train advocates to make them available to parties to administrative disputes. So the conciliation clerk should know who these people are, if they exist. Or the diocesan bishop, when you put in your recourse. I request that you appoint me a advocate. I've seen them on websites, right? They got advocates. The procedure for hierarchical recourse in its historical origins and its present incarnation is designed primarily as a means by which hierarchical superiors can exercise supervision over the activities of their subordinates and ensure the legality of a public administration. That's what it's really there for. The procedure is designed only indirectly and secondarily to protect the rights of the faithful from abridgment by administrative authorities. Well, if they were doing it right, your rights wouldn't have been violated, so they must not be legal. While it may be inadequate to correct the most egregious abuses or lapses of judgment, its primary focus on the legitimate legality of administrative acts makes it rather blunt instrument for protecting the rights of the faithful in the church's administrative process. It's one hell of a hammer. All right, they're going to give you a hammer, and you don't have to say that much to get the ball rolling and then ask for an advocate and finish it up. And we believe that we have an office within the church and that our records have been kept local, and so the church doesn't know that we exist, and that's affecting my rights within the church. Right? And leave it at that. Okay, well, the fact that the code has provided only the most minimal procedural norms to guide the evolution procedure for hierarchical recourse may be a blessing in disguise, right? This is the whole thing. It's really loosey-goosey. It's just we never do it. We never go back and say, well, I appeal your decision. I want a hierarchical recourse back to the diocesan bishop, because he certainly doesn't want it to go to the Holy See, because then we could get it to the congregation for the something of faith and morals. Why can't I remember that? The Holy Inquisition, and say, hey, you guys are denying the Holy Spirit. So, okay, that's all I can do today. My head hurts. I am going to look at one last thing just to make sure I covered it, just so that you can go find this for yourself. Archdiocese of Miami Metropolitan Tribunal due process procedure for the Archdiocese of Miami. The due process procedures. And I'm not sure that this is exactly the same as hierarchical recourse. In fact, I'm quite sure it isn't, because when you get to the part where it talks about it as being something a little bit different. And it is, because we're not using the courts and so forth, and we don't need to use a conciliator. We can just go directly, by recourse, you can go directly back to the archdiocesan bishop and say, you're claiming hierarchical recourse because your rights have been violated. However, I'll accept conciliation and arbitration. Right? But this is really good. It talks, you want due process. Well, at least somebody talks about there being a procedure for it. I've never seen the procedure for due process. There it is. And it says something about by its nature, the notion of due process is analogous and not unequivocal. It is more a principle of justice than a specific rule of law. Good, it's a principle of justice. So, and this kind of goes through what you're supposed to do if you have a dispute. But it starts with finding this conciliation clerk, who is supposed to have been the conciliation clerk. Let's find out the role of the conciliation clerk. She will receive the written grievance containing within it a signed affirmation of an effort that has been made to reach settlement prior to filing. The reconciliation clerk will ascertain the petitioner that the wording of the petition is stated with precision and truly expresses the position of the petitioner. The petitioner is responsible for the formulation of any dispute and may maintain assistance to the source of stating the dispute with clarity and precision. May obtain assistance from any source. In stating the dispute, two requirements should be kept in mind: the statement of the dispute concretely and specifically with names, dates, places, occasions, and some authoritative statement or policy. Law or principle may be cited if applicable. Right? You can bring all these things up. Now they talk about in here if there's already a civil action going on, and my thing is, if there's a civil action going on, maybe you can't do this. Where is that stuff at? I may have already passed it. But then it goes in administrative tribunal, which is the next step, right? You went to your brother first, you got another witness, and then you go to court. Boom, boom, boom. But the thing about there being a civil matter, civil case, it isn't because there's no court seals on it. That's the problem, right? There hasn't been one opened up yet. There hasn't been a civil matter opened up yet. That's not a court. It's not a court in the civil, what we would call the civil side, because those guys aren't elected. They don't have bonds. They don't have oaths. Simulated legal process, no court seals, so forth and so on. So we'll be talking about this one more here in the next few days, but if you have an issue and you're a little more proactive than most people, you might want to go make a phone call, find the conciliation clerk, and find out what kind of paperwork she can give you. What do you have I can look at? What do you need? I need everything you have. One of each. So, okay. I'll ask one more time before I end the day. Please donate. If you can stop it right now and write down my daughter's PayPal account. Send a little something. Be great. Through the mail, a little something, something. Excellent. I can't pay my rent. Can't buy no food. Can't pay for the frickin' bill for the cable coming up. Got lots of cants right now. Need a little help. Depending on you. God bless. See ya.